Pluto and the digital identity of Australia. Welcome to a multi-part series on the astrology of Australia as we navigate 2025, 2026, and beyond, and in particular, the shifting identity of this once great land. So, a lot of the inquiries, questions, and comments from followers and clients over the last 6 to 12 months have been around the idea of digital identity. What's happening, why is it happening now, and how do we navigate this particular time? And I do not have all the answers to this. I'm just like the rest of us, sort of moving through this experience and as an observer, but also very cautious as we move ahead. So, what I've done is I've broken down the astrology of the Australia birth chart in the hopes to sort of bring a bit of awareness around the energetics of what this time represents. Now, the people in government, the low levels of the government, the very low level of government is the politicians, right? They're the low level. They're just the talking heads that they put out there, the political puppets. They're pushing particular narratives, propaganda, and agenda, but they're not really in the know. But know that the shadow government and the people are the mechanisms behind the, puppets, they know what's going on. And in particular, they know what time it is. So if they know what time it is, and we can look at the same cosmic clock, then we can understand what time it is, and we can understand why they're pushing particular agendas, why they might hope to succeed in those agendas, and how do we push back against them using the very, energy or cosmic consciousness that they're tapping into. And that's my job as an astrologer, is to bring awareness to the sky clock and the energetics of the time that we're moving through in relation to your own energetic consciousness, determined by the blueprint, the soul blueprint, which is your birth chart, and help you navigate life. And especially in these very challenging fucking times that we live. So much is changing so rapidly, but yet nothing's really happening. In order for me to do that, I need to first establish which birth chart of Australia we're going to use. And historically, I've tend to lean towards the Federation chart of 1901. However, in this particular video and the subsequent videos, I'll be looking at the settlement chart of 1788. So there was a great Australian astrologer named Ed Tamplin. He was a mundane astrologer, and he did a lot of work on the mundane affairs of Australia and the sort of cycles and themes as we sort of evolve this country, or the idea of what this country is. And he has since passed away a few years ago, passed away of cancer. And he is famous for rectifying the birth time of the settlement chart of 1788. So it's January 26, 1788. This is the time of supposedly Captain Cook's landing on the shores of Botany Bay. And he rectified this time to 5:23 a.m. in the morning. And it was sort of, respected by a lot of professional astrologers of the time to sort of suggest that this was an accurate birth time for that particular chart. So that's the chart that I'll be using, and I'll be looking at, in particular, the planetary cycles in relation to the outer planets. I'm not so interested in, the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars's movement. More so Jupiter, Saturn, and then Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto's transits to that particular chart. So when we cross-reference historical events to that particular chart, we have quite accurate symbolism. So that's why I'm inclined to use it for these particular series of video. The other thing is that I was going to make this video one big long video and look at everything all at once, but in the research that I was putting together for it, it was just overwhelming. And there's so much to sort of cover here that it's best to break it up into these series. So this is the first of a many-part series. How many, I do not know. We'll just see with where we go. So without further ado, let's look at the chart. Like any birth chart, we're looking at a specific time, date, and location that this chart is cast for. So this particular chart, 26th of January, 1788, 5:23 a.m. in Sydney, Australia, gives the chart Aquarius rising. The Sun in Aquarius, 5 degrees, conjunct the Ascendant, however, on the 12th house side of the Ascendant, using the Porphyry house system, which is a quadrant house system aligned to the Placidus system. So that's a particular chart house system that I like to use. The moon in the 8th house in Virgo, the midheaven is Libra, the descendant is Leo, and the IC is Aries. Okay, so we'll go through some of these planetary alignments of this particular birth chart and how the natal promise of this chart is activated with transit cycles and themes as we move through time. What I'm interested in this particular video is the transit of Pluto. And already, those of you out there following along will know that Pluto has moved into Aquarius. In 2023, Pluto moved into Aquarius, and it's been straddling the Capricorn Aquarius cusp right through to the end of November of 2024, in which then it moved into Aquarius permanently, and it'll be there till 2044, on and off from 2040 and into 2044. It'll be going from Aquarius and then moving into Pisces, which means a couple of things. So when Pluto moved into Aquarius, it's moved into an applying conjunction with the sun of this particular birth chart, and then shortly after that with the ascendant, which is the ascendant is the angle, one of the main angles of any chart, the most sensitive point in the whole entire chart, whether it's a birth chart of a person or a nation, usually is the ascendant and the specific degree. That's why we needed to know the time for this chart, 5:23 a.m., because that tells us the precise degree of the ascendant. So we have Pluto and the themes associated with Pluto that's going to impact on the sun and the ascendant of the settlement chart for Australia. So, what does that mean? And why is the theme of identity in particular coming up as some point of topic? And why are they trying to create this new identity of the citizens of the land that's this digital new age identity? Well, that all makes sense as we unpack the symbolism of this Pluto transit. Before we get there, there's a couple of things that we want to address. Is we want to look historically at Pluto's transit through this chart, in particular when it made specific alignments to key parts of the chart. Now, notice that where Pluto was when Australia was settled, 1788, it was in Aquarius at 15 degrees in the first house. So not only is Pluto in Aquarius conjuncting the Sun and Ascendant of this birth chart, it's also moving towards the Pluto return. And from 2033 to 2034, Australia will have its Pluto return. And if you want an understanding of what that might mean, go and look at the US from 2022-ish through now. What's been happening is the US was going through its Pluto return because I think it was 1776, right? That the independence or the Declaration of Independence was signed in the US, right? So, meaning that the settlement Australia, the first fleet, and the creation of the Federation of America, in other words, the independence of America, sort of coincided with each other. Their chart has Pluto in Capricorn at very late degrees of Capricorn. Ours has it sort of mid Aquarius. So, and that's because it was, a few years or so later. With Pluto, we deal with the unconscious desire for change, transformation at the core. And usually this is coming from some hidden force deep within the unconscious of either the person or the collective, or in this case, the country. And what that tends to mean is that we have changes that are occurring, or the desire for change, or at least the pressure for change that's occurring, that is sort of like an invisible force at play. Pluto in Greek mythology known as Hades, god of the underworld. And the underworld in this case represents the unconscious. Now, Pluto, because it represents things that are deeply hidden or unconscious or in the shadow, can also represent forces that are concealed, right? Concealed forces that are shadow forces, hidden groups, hidden enemies, hidden sort of organizations, groups, or a collection of people that are pulling the strings, let's say, from behind the scenes. Like the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain. Well, in this case, the man behind the curtain would be this Pluto energy. So the types of experiences that we go through with Pluto tend to be the types of transformation, irrevocable change, death and rebirth, phoenix moments. Everything's brought down, purged and purified, transformed to the core, Quite often, Pluto transits relate to crises of particular nature. When we had Pluto conjunct Saturn at the beginning of 2020 in Capricorn, 22 degrees of Capricorn, that coincided with a worldwide global health pandemic. And I use the word global very, very loosely, if you know what I mean. Let's just say worldwide pandemic. Let's try and steer away from the word global. It's flat. If in your own life you're going through a Pluto moment in your life, there is a desire at a really deep unconscious level, call it a soul level desire for change. And the more that one resists the urge for change, the more tension is built up and the more extreme the crises can emerge as a indicator or a mechanism for the type of change that needs to occur. So with Pluto, it's like there is a crossroad that you reach. One way leads to a transformation through a crisis. And the result is that you or the situation is changed to the core irrevocably, can't go back to the way it was. It's a death and a rebirth. And the other way on this crossroad is the pathway of self-transformation. You do the thing necessary to make the changes. Now, that's the high road and the path least traveled. However, it leads to the same place. Change to the core, irrevocable, death and rebirth. The process, though, through crises is disempowerment, and through self-transformation is empowerment. And I've gone both pathways in my lifetime. And I can say that both are very difficult. One is difficult to walk, the other is difficult to initiate. However, the outcome is the same. You change, or that aspect of your life is changed to the core. Right? I want you to remember this mechanism for transformation. It's changed the core, and it doesn't go back to how it was. It's a rebirth. Now, hopefully, that rebirth can come so that you're more empowered, more aligned, more deeply authentic and soul driven in a personal level. However, if there are hidden forces subversing and covertly taking control of this process, the shadow element and aspect can come in here, and we can have that mechanism for change that's controlled, right? So think global reset, the great reset, and they want to reset us. The reason they want to reset us is because they want to control the reset button and how it's reset. So this whole idea of resetting something, rebooting it, going back to the beginning, or completely, death and rebirth is a very Pluto theme. First of all, what we're going to do is we're going to track the transit of Pluto back across a few key parts of the Australia birth chart, in particular the North Node, the midheaven, the Moon, and the descendant, which actually puts it in opposition to the Sun. We can go back to 1940-ish through that time period, and we can look at this particular alignment and how it tied into particular historical events, and then the symbolism that matched this particular alignment. And that's why I'm using the Australia settlement chart for this video series, because I found it very interesting, looking at these planetary cycles and themes and how they relate symbolically to events that we went through as a nation. So between 2005 and 2006, Pluto was in Sagittarius in the 11th house, transiting the North Node of the Australia birth chart. And a couple of interesting things happen here. Think Sagittarius, think ideological, think long distance, foreign land, foreign culture. We're looking at the 11th house, we're looking at the collective, we're looking at our collective identity, we're looking at some of the heroes that we have worshipped through this particular period of time as a nation. And we're also looking at external events and how they might impact on the direction of Australia. So through this time period were the Cronulla riots, where that was a sort of a race-baited riot that started after some Middle Eastern people attacked some lifeguards in Cronulla Beach, and then the retaliation that occurred. I remember at that time, I was going in 2005, I think it was, or maybe early 2006, to the Big Day Out. And my favorite band, Tool, was playing, and Tool were playing the Big Day Out of the Gold Coast. They were doing a sideshow in Sydney, and they were playing the Big Day Out in Sydney. So I went to the Gold Coast show, the sideshow in Sydney, and then I went to the Sydney Big Day Out. I remember going to the Sydney Big Day Out. It was a few days or a week or so after the Cronulla riots. So they banned the Australian flag and there was heavy police presence. So what did everyone do? everyone donned their Australian flag and said, "Up yours, buddy." So I remember that quite distinctly, and that time period. So some other things that happened around this time period with Pluto transiting the North Node and impacting on the collective direction that our country tends to go was we had the death of Steve Irwin and Peter Brock within a week or so of each other, right around eclipse season of that particular year as well. And the eclipses were in the Virgo Pisces axis, South Node in Virgo. So they were squaring the nodes of Australia and also activating this Pluto transit. So transformation through crisis, death and rebirth, public identity. We had two icons of Australian sort of, heritage pass away within a week or so of each other, Steve Irwin and Peter Brock. That was also a time, London bombings. So they took place, I think it was 2007. So it was around this time period that we had some other worldly events and the impact that they had on. And this is where you had a lot of the terror laws coming into full force and what that meant for not only us here, but also everyone around the world. If we track back a little bit more and we go to when Pluto was transiting through Libra, Pluto actually made a conjunction with Saturn in Libra in the early 80s. So Pluto's transit of the midheaven of this particular country coincided with Ash Wednesday, which was a major crisis event, bushfire incident that happened in Victoria. This was a time period as well where the dollar was floated, the Australian dollar was floated. We also had the Mabo case, which was the Aboriginal land rights case, as Pluto was transiting the MC, and you could say that that's the political sort of direction of the country. And there was a big shift, political shift from Liberal to Labor around that particular time as well. And I think Bob Hawke was elected in the early 80s. So that coincided with Pluto's transit of the MC. If we go back a little further, we had Pluto transiting Virgo, and Pluto transiting Virgo was moving it into a conjunction to the moon. And this was early 60s, 61, I think, to what was it, 63 to 65. And this coincided with two big events. One was the assassination of JFK, so that was a real emotional hit to the collective consciousness, and that hit the moon of Australia. And this was also a time as well, shared resources, where Australia had committed troops to the Vietnam War around that particular time. We go back a little further, we can see Pluto's transiting across Leo, and that moved it through a conjunction with the descendant, right? Opposite, sort of opposing the ascendant of the birth chart, and also into an opposition to the sun of this particular chart. And that was 1941 to 44 that Pluto was in this area here. And that's an opposition to the ascendant and also the sun of this birth chart. And that in particular coincided with World War II. And in World War II, we had the submarine incident that happened in the Sydney Harbour. We also had an attack on Darwin around that particular time. So we go back through this Pluto transit. Now, is Pluto the only significant energy to occur through this time that sort of foreshadowed these particular time periods and historical events? No, there's other things going on as well. But as a big overarching theme, we can see these big type of transformational events that take place and how they impact on certain aspects of us as a nation. So let's bring it back to where we are today, and more importantly, where we're going to be over the next 2 to 3 years. As Pluto, being the slowest moving outer planet, can sometimes take up to 5 years to make that alignment. And by the time it makes its first conjunction to its final conjunction, and in that time period, you can have Pluto transiting a particular part of either this chart or your own birth chart up to 5 times. So it's a slow transformational process. Most people that have been through a plutonic moment of transformation in their life, it's not until they look back afterwards and go, if they're still alive. Thank fuck that's over. Thank fuck that's done. Holy shit, everything's changed, whether it's been a career path, a health issue, a relationship, Sometimes it's your whole particular identity and a complete death and rebirth. So now we have Pluto moving into a conjunction with the Sun of the Australia birth chart. And the Sun in your own birth chart is going to represent your self-image. In other words, your identity. The Sun being the vehicle for your soul to express itself in this world, your identity, in other words, who am I, is the vehicle for self-expression. So the sun in the birth chart of a country represents the national identity. And we have Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth, transformation, irrevocable change impacting this. Now, this has been slowly building since 2023 as Pluto made its presence felt in Aquarius. However, in 2026, from March forward, Pluto will be in exact conjunction to the Sun. That conjunction will move on and off right through until 2028. And it's in that time period, in 2027, March of 2027, that Pluto will move across the ascendant of the birth chart as well. So not only are we having Pluto conjunct the Sun, in other words, a transformation of national identity, we're also having it impact the ascendant, and the ascendant represents the people. In the nation's chart, where are the people of the country represented? They're represented by the first house. So we're not only getting this shift of our public national identity, we're also impacting on the collective of the people, each of us. Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, those powers that want to be hiding in the shadows, that, have their political puppets and bureaucrats out here in the public face, they know exactly what time it is. And that's exactly why the idea of digital identity is coming into the collective and what that might mean. Because you have hidden shadow groups of power wanting to control the transformation and change of national identity. Now, there are other things happening at this time, which in future videos I'm going to continue to unpack. But I want to stay on this idea and theme of Pluto and what it might represent. When we have a Pluto transit, we're dealing with power and the use of power. Often you feel completely disempowered when you're going through a Plutonic transit. And, it's a time where you want to engage in self-empowerment, which is to do the difficult thing. Take responsibility for your life, take responsibility for the truth at a deep core level. And if you do so, you're able to access the power that the unconscious has, the unconscious, right? The power of the darkness, the dark side. Use the force. Can we see it? Is it visible? No, but we understand that it's there. What is this underlying force? This is the power of the unconscious, the power of the soul at a deep level. And this is being used against the people. And it's used in a very tricky way because what do we have at the moment? We have a power crisis happening in Australia. Yes, we do. We have it in the guise of climate change and net zero. That is the propaganda that they want you to see and to think that's why there's a rising cost of power. No, it's very simple. How do you disempower people? You put the cost of energy, make it harder and higher and higher. And what does that do? It disempowers the people, literally. It's in the words, right? This continual disempowerment of the people is to make energy itself much more difficult to access and much higher cost involved to get it. And this saying that we're doing this for net zero, that is just the smoke screen told to you by the political puppets. The real reason is because they want the people of this country, while they go through this reset, right? While they go through this process, they want to weaken the power of the people because there is the potential, like there is with all astrological transits and alignments and cycles, there is the power of the people. There's a potential for the people to tap into this power and for them to go through this uprising and revolution and to take control of this process of change and to say no and push back. And they are so afraid of that. They're so afraid of the collective power of the people when we come together in these groups, these Aquarian groups, right? When we organize on a mass level in groups, we have the power and we've always got the power. But if we're convinced that we don't, This is where it's a tricky path forward. And this is where people find themselves in relation to the digital identity. Oh, I don't want to do it. I don't. So don't consent. Just like the COVID vax, right? I'll come to that point in a moment because this ties into that. Because what was happening at the end of 2020 when they brought out the inoculation was a Jupiter-Saturn cycle beginning right at the 0 degrees of Aquarius. So it's tying what's happening now back into the jab in particular and power and the disempowerment that occurred, especially for who out of the whole world went through the most extreme mandates and lockdowns and, you know, you know, pressure through that time? Australia, right? It's all starting to make sense to you now. This is all starting to see the bigger picture that's what's going on. So, awakening of the power of the people, that's what needs to happen through this time period. Otherwise, you're going to have hidden groups in collective power shadows taking control of the transformational change of the national identity of Australia. We're losing ourselves. Mass immigration coming in. We've got this debate around, the Aboriginal, the First Peoples, and, the voice and the treaties and all of these things. All this is all smokescreen because what they're most afraid of is the collective power of the people coming and saying, you know what, fuck off. Fuck off to the system, to the beast, to the government, to the political dark power, to this corrupted up system that's been, subverting and corrupting the misuse of power for hundreds of years, probably since settlement. And it's coming to light at a time when they're going to try to enforce digital identity, which is happening when we're going through a massive transformation of national identity. Coincidental? I think not. So I have a couple of things that I'd like to address in this video before we wrap things up. In particular, I want to look at the short-term future in relation to the Pluto transit across the Sun and Ascendant of the birth chart of Australia, and some significant aspects that tend to trigger this particular transit and bring more of its energy to the surface. So you could look at these as peak periods ahead to be cautious of. Well, how does one do that? Let's take a look back at the COVID era and people's response to that, especially here in Australia, and then who it may fall upon moving forward to do something about in relation to the transformation or the controlled demolition of the national identity of Australia. I don't think that a lot of people understand the power and the gravity of what's happening at the moment in relation to the cosmic alignments and how they impact on us individually and collectively, and the shift of consciousness that they correlate to. So we're not only dealing with Pluto transiting through Aquarius, we're also having a Saturn-Neptune conjunction at the 0 degrees of Aries, which happens on the 17th of February 2026. I'm saving that particular alignment for part two of this series. So I'm going to take a deep dive into the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and looking back in history again, looking at the symbolism. But just know that Saturn-Neptune, when they move into Aries and have their conjunction, they are sextiling, supporting, creating an opportunity and sort of communicating with this Pluto into Aquarius. You have fire sign here, air sign here, so you have a sextile, a 60-degree alignment, which creates a sort of level of potency and ties these qualities together. We also have Uranus, the rebellion, the revolutionary planet, the change maker, sudden upheaval. And it's into Gemini now, retrograding. It'll move back into Taurus, and then next year it'll move into Gemini again, where it'll be in Gemini for the next 7 years. And, Gemini's an air sign. So when we have Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius, there's a trine that happens. So these particular outer planets are supercharging this Pluto transit, which makes this a very significant transit to watch over the coming years, especially 2026 through 2028. So again, I'll be covering more of the Uranus energy in another video later. But what I want to do is I want to look ahead, uh, especially early next year, at some time periods where you could have this plutonic energy really peaking. Um, so firstly, we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, 17th of February, 2026. And then in July of 2026, we have Jupiter, the king of the gods, the god of thunder and expansion and amplification, growth. and it's moving into Leo, and that'll bring it into an opposition to Pluto. So we'll have a Jupiter-Pluto opposition. And we'll also have around July of next year, we'll have a Mars moving into a conjunction with Uranus at about the time that that is trining Pluto. And that's going to be also in July. So we're going to have Jupiter opposite Pluto, Mars, Uranus conjunct each other, trining Pluto. So July of 2026 is a particularly potent time period. And then in October of 2026, Mars will be up in Leo and we'll have Mars in opposition to Pluto. Now, the interesting thing is because Pluto is transiting across the conjunction with our Sun and Ascendant, any opposition is going to mean that the planet in opposition is going to be directly across our descendant. And this is the part of the chart which relates to foreign relations, our local relationships with our neighboring countries, as well as open enemies. So that's one to watch for 2026. Now, the other thing that's occurring, which through my research was quite interesting to look at, was the eclipse cycle. And even though the nodes are still going to be in Pisces North Node, Virgo South Node early next year, we do have a new moon eclipse happening on the 17th of February 2026, and it's going to happen in conjunction to Saturn and Venus in the Australia birth chart. And that's an interesting period of time because what I've found through my research is that either just on or around or shortly after eclipses, certain eclipses, not all, but certain eclipses, there has been some quite significant events take place in Australia's history. More recently, we had the 2023 Libran eclipse that happened around our midheaven, so a very political point in relation to the birth chart of a nation. And that eclipse was happening the day after the voice referendum, literally the day after. Now, needless to say, that wasn't successful, but was that intended to be that way all along? Second, sort of interesting time period I found was about 12 days before Black Saturday in 2009. There was an Aquarian eclipse, new moon eclipse, happening in our birth chart in the first house. And then back in 1996, about 10 days before the Port Arthur massacre, there was also another solar eclipse. So in February of 2026, there will be a solar eclipse conjunct Saturn and Venus in the first house of the Australia birth chart. And eclipses in and of their own deal with significant endings or beginnings. There's a level of chaos, unpredictability. However, what I've found is that the eclipse energy itself sometimes isn't symbolically connected to the events that are timed for that time period. More so, what an eclipse will do is trigger or release some of the major transits of that particular time. So you could say that the transit is holding and containing the energetics and the symbolism of a story that's unfolding, and an eclipse is like a punctuation point or a trigger point along the transit's journey that tends to peak the expression of that particular energy. So, 2026 is going to kick off with a bang. It's February the 17th, the eclipse. So, late February and early March, I'd be looking to, significant sort of events occurring here for us in Australia. And, that's going to be the first house that could impact on people, and a lot of people. Saturn is the ruler of the ascendant and is the ruler of our 12th house as well through Capricorn. So we could be having some shadowy aspects to this. We could be having direct impact on the people, and Saturn, in and of its own, is associated to death, authority, government. Venus, the values, women, money as well. So it's an interesting period of time. I know towards the end of this year they're going to bring in um, the ban on social media for people under 16, for children under 16, and that's a lot of our fifth house energy going on here. This is where the Uranus energy is transiting through our fifth house. So fifth house, the children or the youth of the nation would be depicted by this fifth house. So that's a really significant time period to look at. And then as Jupiter moves into Leo in July of next year, let me just move forward to July of next year. We're going to have so from about mid to late July and into even early August, Jupiter moving through the early degrees of Leo, moving into an opposition to the Sun, an opposition to Pluto, an opposition to the Australian Ascendant. And this is happening if we back up a little bit, a couple of weeks here. Beginning of July, this is Mars entering into Gemini, making a conjunction with Uranus. And Mars, we have the inflammation, we have a trigger point, we have a decisive moment, Uranus energy, we have sudden and unpredictable change and upheaval. That alignment is going to trine Pluto as Jupiter is going to oppose Pluto, all happening to our Sun and Ascendant of this particular birth chart. So in the short term period ahead, we're in for a lot of instability, volatility, upheaval, and potential crisis, probably from February forward with that eclipse activating our Saturn. And then July into October is a really peak period in relation to the symbolism associated to this Pluto transit in particular and the complete transformation of the national identity and the people of our beautiful country. So who remembers 2020? Good old 2020. Actually, it was 2019, very late 2019, where they showed you this image of the person laying down in front of the red door in China. And as soon as I saw that on the news, it was repeated over and over and over again. This image was repeated. And as soon as they started to use this image over and over and over again, my spidey senses picked up, and I was like, I smell some fuckery afoot. And this happened prior to the Saturn Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, which was, I think, the 12th, 13th of January of 2020, which was really the instigator astrologically of the worldwide pandemic. And, through the whole problem reaction solution, the problem is, oh my God, there's a pandemic. Reaction is let's lock down, mandate masks, social distance, all the works, and lockdowns. 6 lockdowns later, as I lived in Melbourne during this period of time. Moved to the solution aspect towards the end of 2020 and into 2021, and that was, oh, hallelujah. We've got the shot. Okay, so the shot was, you know, touted as the way out of this for everyone, which was, as we know, the intention all along. Now, a couple of things they used to administer control over the masses. How did they get it? They used fear. And they used the fear of what? They used the fear of death, right? So this is the control mechanism of the ruling authority, is to put you in a state of fear, and you're not going to be able to go to the footy, see your nana, go things, do things. You're not going to be able to do that. You're going to be locked out, right? Remember that? So what I would say that the response was this, and I'm going to loosely use these percentages. So, just think of this as fluid. But if we were able to just look back and say, okay, this was the percentage of people that did these certain things, then we can apply that to this time period we're moving through now and sort of say, well, who does it fall upon to stand their ground, to be the change? So they're going to push the fear of exclusion again in relation to digital identity. If you don't get it, you're going to be excluded from accessing government services and going to the doctor and doing all sorts of things, right? It was the same MO with COVID. If you don't take the shot, you're not going to the footy. If you don't have digital ID, well, you can't get the bloody handout or whatever. Okay, all right. So let's look at the percentage of people that responded and how they responded to the COVID era. I would say 30% of people, maybe more, right, took that shot, like ran to get that shot. As soon as it came out, they were first in line. They changed their profile picture and said, I did the thing for a thing. And, and they had the picture of the Band-Aid and they were like, I reckon 30% of the people like bang, straight onto it. I reckon 30% of the people held off and went, I don't really want to do it, but I have to because I want to go to work. I want to go to footy. I want to do those things. And they probably didn't rush to get it, but they probably just did it anyway. So now you've got 60% of the people that really have just either taken it free will or didn't want to take it but took it anyway because they didn't have the power or the conscious awareness to be able to say no, right? And the thought of not being able to do certain things and excluded from society and all of that was like too much to bear. So succumb to that pressure. And again, these percentages are fluid. Then you had probably 30%, maybe 20 to 30% of people that said, fuck that, not doing it. And of those 30%, 25 probably maintained their stronghold, and probably 5% of those, give or take, eventually came and got the one, didn't get it, didn't want to, and had to get the follow-up one, but didn't want to do it, and so on and so forth. So that leaves about 10% of people on either end of the spectrum. So 10% of the people were probably in nursing homes or of disabled sort of body or mind, and were it was just they didn't factor into it. And yeah, had probably another percentage on the other end that just didn't exist, were just not part of this process whatsoever. Who do you think is going to fall upon with regards to digital identity and the pushback that's required to say, no, we don't want that as a people. We don't want that as a nation. And we're prepared to be excluded from whatever it is that you're excluded from if you don't have one? Is it going to be the 30% that just went, yay, let's do it. Get the band-aid. I did the right thing. You know, I can't wait for the next Facebook profile changes that are going to come about based on digital identity. Is it going to be the next 30% that just had a weak will and couldn't stand the thought of being not able to go to the footy? Probably not. So who's it going to fall upon to do something about this? Now, here's the trick the devil plays on you is thinking that that you have no power and that you can't persuade things and we all have to do it and you all have to go along and and that's not the case because COVID proved that, right? So yes, for a period, you might be excluded for certain things, but where is this leading if we succumb to this? Okay, where are we going to end up in relation to this? Social credit system, complete surveillance, locked out of your bank, can't buy certain things, can't travel, right? It's the lockdown cities, the 15, minute cities, all that sort of shit. And that's the place you want to go to. Is that the reality? Like, because this isn't about the digital identity, it's about what comes after it. Okay. So I'm not suggesting to you what you should or shouldn't do and how you should go about this. And if you're one of the 30% that's going to rush out and has already got the digital ID and is next lined up for the chip in the head, that's your free will and choice, and I'm not taking that from you. Just know that the propaganda machine has worked wonders on you, and you think you're exercising your free will and choice. Eh, one would argue that perhaps there's a little bit of brainwashing that has gone on via the system. And we can see a lot of that at the moment with a lot of polarization and extremes on both sides in relation to the division that's been massaged, amplified, triggered, and spread through the collective. So the choice is yours, and the offer for this is there. And when you're saying, what do we got to do about that? How do we navigate that? You must choose. You must find the way. You must be prepared, just like through COVID, right? You must be prepared for the consequences that may come by standing your ground. And you must be prepared for the consequences that will come if you submit to this. And they may not happen initially, but in time, that's the direction they want to go. Now, what I will say is this, they're going to use the classic playbook of fear and the fear of expulsion from society, maybe even fines, maybe even restrictions on access to certain things, right? And even travel to a certain point. So, have you got the willpower to stand your ground and to endure? I mean, COVID was a test ground on so many levels, but was it testing you and did you pass that test? This is a test for the people of this nation. This is a test of our national identity. I'm an optimist, Sagittarius rising. I'm an optimist. And I feel that what we need to do is exercise our free will and choice and our voice. Forget voice to parliament. What about voice to the nation? Your voice. Your voice matters. Whether you came here as an immigrant, whether you were born here or whether you're a second generation POM or whatever, it doesn't really matter. If you are here and you call this place home, then you're Australian. And if you choose to live here, this is your opportunity to defend what you love about this country, its history, its bloody history. Right? So bear that in mind as you navigate this time in relation to the shift, the transformation, the revolution, the changes that are coming, and the ability that we have to participate in the awakening of the collective consciousness and the choices that we individually and collectively can make. And we have to take back the power from those hidden forces that have infiltrated the bureaucracy and the political system and corporations and the media in this nation and all Commonwealth and most Western nations. Who do you think that's going to fall upon? Some hidden, you know, mystical, magical sort of unicorn coming from the sky to do this for you? This is about the people. In future videos, we're going to look at some of the major astrological alignments associated to this and how they play into it and what they might represent. And as we do, we're going to paint a bit of a picture to the astrology of, in particular, us here living in Australia. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, hit the thumbs up, subscribe for the next one, and peace out. See you guys soon.